All right, here we are on February 10th. It's the Dev Talk Show. I'm here with my co-host Andy Schwam. How's it going, Andy?
It's gone. I think it's going pretty well. I'm just
Yeah,
checking
yeah,
audio, and
sure, right?
it was another chaotic start, But we're here, we're live, and I think everything's
Yeah.
running.
It's really hard to be producer in front of the camera, right? Because we watch TV and all these people are behind the camera and who knows what I've never been in a TV studio. Who knows what they're pointing and say and shouting in people's ears and we're doing that on camera. So, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and Rich makes the whole thing look easy generally,
Yeah.
um, and it's not that easy. It's not that easy, but we're we get it done. We get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, here we are. Can you believe it? It's already almost the middle of February. And I feel like
Wow.
this happens every year. Is the year starts like, hey, it's a new year, and then it's like May.
It's
So
like, yeah, things fly. Everything just like moves along at like a pace. It's like insane. And I notice it at work in particular when we think like, oh, I don't know if you guys do this. Sometimes we don't always get all the plans in for the new year in advance or something like that. And so, or even if we do, and we're just like wrapping things up, and you think the next thing you know, we're like, how did it get to be March and we haven't started our 21 projects yet? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's just like,
right.
wow, time's
Yeah, and you're
flying.
still yeah. I mean, I've still caught myself a couple times saying 2020 or you know what I had to do the other day? I had to write a check, like actually write a check.
Yeah.
And I almost put 2020 on it, which is crazy because like who writes checks anymore? But here we are.
Supposed to automate that, I think.
Yeah, right. So as you can see, we don't have Rich Ross tonight, who was pretty busy, with work, and that's what happens. That's why there's more than two of us, right?
Yeah. That's
That's
actually
okay.
it's so great to have a team that sometimes we're not available, sometimes we
Right,
are, you know.
right, right. And I know in a little while I've put on our calendar there's a night I'm going to miss, and that's okay. That's what it's all about. We're here to have the hallway conversation, the parking lot conversation that we especially are not having now. Um, but we're doing it online and we're having fun with you in the community. So, hey, if you're here watching live, whether that's on Twitch or YouTube, thank you for being here. We'd love to hear what you have to say in the chat room. But if you just want to hang out and watch, that's great too. We appreciate you being here. But please hit the follow button if you're on Twitch. Hit the
Yeah.
subscribe button if you're on YouTube. That way you will know when we go live, which is Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Right now, that's 5 hours behind UTC midnight, and then I think that's right, and then that switches to four a little bit later. So,
It's complicated stuff right there.
well, that's what we get for a living in the daylight savings time, right? Um, so tonight we're gonna do something a little different. We have a trial for a database called Snowflake, which I think, Andy, you hadn't heard of. And so this is actually great. I love when we have the ability to kind of like, I like it when maybe somebody has a topic and I don't know so much about it so that I can ask the questions the audience might ask, or maybe
Yeah.
somebody who's just coming in that says, hey, I want to learn about this. So Snowflake is a fully managed database in the cloud. And it got a lot of attention in its IPO a little while back. I want to say a couple months ago that even Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway is said to have invested. And the story is they never invest in tech. Now, I don't know if that's true. It's the kind of stuff they say on the financial shows. They say they never invest in tech, in startup IPO tech. And yet the story is they were interested in this. So
And I didn't even
what let
catch the story,
yeah.
which is kind of amazing. Like I'm like, um, how did I not even know that this whole thing was going on?
Right, right. So let's see. The first question that
Hang
you
on a
might have,
second. You want me to
Andy.
put you want me to put your screen up?
Yeah, let's go ahead and put the screen up.
Yeah, there we go.
So the first question you probably have is, well, what is this, right? Like let's look at the home page. let me get rid of this little ad here. Let's look at the home page. And what are you getting from this?
So yeah, what do I
Yeah,
see?
go ahead. I want you to tell me
Yeah,
what you
right.
think.
So it says the data cloud, right? Um, and it just says mobilize your data. I got to tell you, I went and checked on this earlier today because I wanted
Great,
to, or
good.
yesterday. I kind of wanted to be prepared, and I'm like, I don't know. It just says mobilize your data, access a world of data. Like it, I don't know what that means. To mobilize my data doesn't sound like it's a database or anything like that. It sounds like a way to get my data on a phone or something. Honestly, that's what I was thinking, right?
Yeah.
Now maybe I'm an idiot, and I'll accept that. You know, like maybe I'm an idiot, but I
No.
didn't. I didn't figure it
No.
out. You know.
So here's the thing. I want to make it very clear. This episode isn't sponsored. No one asked us to do this. We have no one from Snowflake that we talked to about doing this. This is coming purely from experience. And that was on purpose because I think we wanted to get away from a commercial. We wanted to just say, like, hey, let's talk about what I know. Let's talk about what anybody in the chat has heard. And I want to know what Andy thinks when he looks at a site that's attempting to do marketing, right? So let's see if this works. Let's see if the Dev Talk Show Telestrator is working tonight. Oh, look at that. It actually, okay, so first thing I got to do is
Illustrator.
draw
You always
instead of,
wanted
let's
to be
see if
on
the
Monday
dev,
Night Football. I know you
right?
did. Here it
So
goes.
Snowflake, the data cloud, mobilize your data. It's not drawing very well. I'm clearly not that great at it. And then it shows you a bunch of stuff down here. Data engineering, data lake, data warehouse. Aren't these all the buzzwords that you've heard the last several years?
Right, right. When you scroll down to this part and you see data science, data warehouse, eliminate data silos and run your workloads from a single platform, to me sounds like data lake or something like that. But when you scroll, you lose. Yeah, you got to clear those
Yep,
out.
we're getting
But
there. We'll
yeah,
get
now
it.
you're right. Now you've got all your buzzwords right there.
Yeah, so now here's where I will tell you this is beginning to be a little bit more accurate here. It's a near zero database.
Right.
It scales without you having to do anything. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I think maybe the best way to kind of give you, Andy, an idea of what this is let's open the thing up. Which, I thought I had this open and ready to go. And you know what I probably did, because it's so easy to do, is I think, oh no, I didn't. I was going to say, I think I accidentally logged out of it. So let's take a look. I just want you to look at this view, right? I say that, right? Right here. Now, I'm not going to say anything. Does this look familiar at all? I'm going to
Well,
zoom in a little bit. That's
yeah,
some
yeah,
pretty
right.
small,
That's
some
kind of
pretty
hard to
small
read,
text.
right? But there you go. Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, my first instinct is that SQL, right? Alter warehouse, set.
All right, all right.
Looking
Good.
like SQL to me.
Okay. And what about over here?
Yeah, my guess is right now I've got a sample database or whatever it looks like that, and and then there's tables, right? So it's looking like I've got a I don't want to say this might not be SQL, and I tend to think of things like my brain goes to like, oh,
Yeah,
SQL Server, but
sure.
it's comfortable to me, it's familiar, right?
Yeah. So you know what none of those slides really, I mean, what none of the website really focused in on is that one way to look at Snowflake is it's like having a relational database, the traditional SQL, whether you're talking ANSI SQL or SQL Server in the cloud. Now, the Snowflake people might if they were here watching, they might be like, "Oh my gosh, we do so much more than that." But my point is, this is what it looks like, right? And the reality is
Yeah.
is, is you're kind of right. Um, at first blush, it looks like you've brought your relational database into the cloud in a fully managed environment. This kind of sort of, if you squint a little bit, might look like a SQL Server Management Studio. I could create more query worksheets here to work in. And I've got this little object explorer here to take a look at the data that's going on. So that doesn't really come across, and there is good reason for that, because not only does Snowflake deal with other types of data, um, I'm not sure that I would say it deals with it in a first class way, but I think it's fair to say that you can kind of see that the direction they're going maybe is more types of data, but they started off bread and butter. Let's make the relational experience really good because
So,
hey,
so
there's a lot of enterprises that rely on relational databases, right?
yeah, so that's like structured data, but right, as another term
Right.
we could use for that, structured data, right?
Yeah, yeah. So Mike says it's snowy up in the north. We're supposed to get a little snow
I,
tonight here where we're at too.
I'm looking out my window right now. It's just, I can't tell. It's too dark out.
Yeah.
There's no
I think they
lights in my
say
backyard.
for me they said a couple hours, so we'll see.
Yeah.
So what I want to make clear is that what we're going to go over tonight is where I think you might start with Snowflake, and it's probably, we're not going to, I don't know how far we'll get. I want to have this conversation, right? So let's see what we talk about. And I want to make it also clear this is a massive product. So I
And
don't know everything.
yeah, I got to props to Ross in the chat there. Pun intended, Snowflake. It's snowing out now, and we're talking about Snowflake. And so, yeah, yeah, that's a good one.
So we're
It
getting some
ties.
other good questions here. In fact, let me see if I can grab one of these here.
Yeah, I do have feature chat enabled. I think I have it on my computer too. If you don't have it, there you go.
Right. So we get this one. What makes Snowflake different from other relationship DBs? And,
Ah,
and
real
for
Japan.
it's
Yeah.
possible, yeah, the Real Japan chimes in. It's possible that the Real Japan's autocorrect dove in there. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about relational databases.
Relationship DBs. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time, right? So let's talk about what makes it different. So one of the things we saw, remember how it said like virtual scale, scale forever, forever. If you set up, let's say you set up a SQL Server on-prem, one of the things you would do is you'd get a bunch of disk, like I don't know, let's call it a terabyte. And then when you needed more, what would happen then?
Oh,
Like
you're
Andy.
asking me. I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
shot.
What would happen then if you needed more?
Well, for SQL Server, I mean, you'd have to. I don't get into the admin side of things too much, but I know it becomes a problem.
Right.
We can either
Well, let
extend
me
the data and add, blades or whatever you call them onto the storage and things like that. It's a pain in the neck, right?
that's supposed to be a disk.
Oh
So
yeah, I thought it
you'd
was a
have to have
top
more
hat.
disk provision, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And
And
anyone in the
then
chat, feel free to grade Chris on his drawing skills. I mean, we can have
yeah,
some fun with
boy,
that.
this is terrible.
Yeah, you're not good at this.
Well, I haven't tried before. So let's clear the canvas. So because we're in the cloud, data is provisioned on Snowflake as you ask for it. Okay.
Data or
So let's
storage,
just
you mean? Data
store,
storage.
no,
Yeah.
data storage.
Okay.
So when you start loading up databases, you just pay for what you use. So like let's say you consume a terabyte, right? Okay, there it is, and it's just you consume it, and then if your database grows beyond a terabyte, it just keeps adding for it. And what you pay is you pay some kind of like average for your data, and there's a total separation between that and the compute side. So on the compute side, when you run queries, they're run in what Snowflake calls a warehouse. Now, some of you who have experience with data warehouses, you might in other data warehouses, and I don't, and some of them might be like Snowflake. I'm not an expert on all of them, but in other data warehouses, you might actually have to pick the amount of compute you want, like how hefty do you want the thing to be, and how much storage you want, and it's like all in one. And in order for you to change it, you got to do some provisioning. That there's no provisioning in Snowflake.
Okay,
When you
that's
ask for
interesting.
it, you get it.
So if you have a heavy load, then Snowflake responds and says, "Okay,
It,
there's a
it,
heavy load. We're going to do something about that."
it can, but it's based on you are in control. So I don't want to make it sound like oh my gosh, it's just gonna do whatever it wants. Is you're in control of how much compute you want. So like the Real Japan says, I thought you could do that with Azure SQL Server
Yeah.
instances, and I'll be totally honest, I'm not. Here's what I don't know. I don't know if it's instant. I don't know if you have to pause first. And there's none of that in Snowflake. So, when you're going down the mental checklist and comparing it, then make those comparisons, right? Because I don't know.
Yeah, Ross the Lip says requires minimal downtime. I haven't noticed the downtime part. I mean, I do know that, and I'm not a complete expert in Azure SQL, but yeah, with a flip of a switch, you can scale up. Um,
Yeah.
but you have to do it. So it's basically Snowflake. I mean, listen, you've been kind of clear here. Like, we don't work for Snowflake. We're just talking about a product. We're going to talk about the
Yep.
things we see, whatever.
Yep.
I mean, that feature to me feels very similar to, like, hey, this is Azure, and this is cloud based stuff, and that's what we expect from from cloud based services. I think.
So
The
I'm going to put a
abilities.
warehouse here, and I'm going to call this XS because it's extra small. So Snowflake defines an extra small warehouse as one server. Now you might ask me, what's a server? It's a server. We're seeing this happen a lot in the cloud, right? Where they kind of say like units are relative to each other. We're not going to sit here and go into immense detail about what's running because they want to be able to change that without you worrying about it. So this is true. There is an extra small warehouse, right? And then there's a small warehouse. And in the small warehouse, what they do for you is they put two servers together. So I'm going to put an S for small. I'm getting a little bit better at this. Okay. You can provision these warehouses. Probably shouldn't use the word provision. You can create and destroy these at will. And I'll show you that in the console a little bit. Creating a warehouse doesn't cost you anything until you start using it. So a warehouse can be created and left in a pause state. And let's use the pause symbol like we're on an old Walkman or something. And people are going to be like, what's a Walkman? Or an old DVD player. It can be left in that pause state and you don't pay anything. You've basically just created this abstraction like, hey, later I might use this warehouse and I want that extra small and I want it now. Okay. Does that make sense, Andy?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're going at a good speed here. So there's other warehouses too. Like I can keep on drawing boxes here. A medium I think is 4. And of course what you do is you pay. There are credits that are expended on warehouses, and there's a charge like it's some amount of credits per hour, but you pay by the second that a warehouse is active, minimum 1 minute. So if you activate a warehouse, use it for 5 seconds, and then shut it down, you get charged a minute. But if you activate a warehouse and use it for 90 seconds and then shut it down, you pay for 90 seconds. Did that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
one thing that's interesting here is I drew this wall on purpose. Maybe it's more like a fence. Is um, data is you create databases, um, but the databases are another fiction of yours. If you wanted to, you could create one database that consumes 20 terabytes, and you will pay for 20 terabytes of storage, or you could create 3 databases, and I'm just because I want to keep reusing what's already on the screen. The numbers aren't going to be super round. And let's say this one you put 10 terabytes of data in, you're going to pay for 31 terabytes of storage. Furthermore, these warehouses can operate on any of these just because of your SQL command. Your SQL command is going to say, use this database, select from this table.
So, Chris,
It, uh-huh. Yeah.
you know, I don't. I'm not here to. I'm not going to try to beat you up or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And I know you're learning about this thing as well. We're talking a lot about, like, sort of pricing and storage, but to me,
Yep.
this so far doesn't sound anything different than a database, right? Like, I still haven't heard, like, what makes it special. Like, in
Well,
SQL Server, I can point to any. I can write a query against any database, right? Like, it doesn't matter which database I'm querying. They're just a bunch of databases, and they might all be different sizes. So, am I missing something, or are you just?
yeah, I think what's missing is that SQL Server has to have access to that disk, right? I can keep on creating warehouses, and I can pick any database I want anytime, and I can get rid of these databases anytime that I want. So while I guess it's technically possible to try and set up that kind of SQL Server infrastructure, you see a SQL Server is tied to disks. Now Azure SQL may have ways to configure that around, but I can just keep adding here and just keep going. I can for whatever I need. So,
Maybe I'm missing what a warehouse is then. I guess
uh-huh.
maybe I'm trying too hard to fit it into the SQL
Yep.
analogy here. But
So
you
a
say
warehouse is
a SQL database is tied to a disk or something like that. But I
yes.
mean, if I have a big server, I don't know. I don't really think about it that way. At work, we just have servers that have SQL Server on it. Uh,
Okay.
Granted, someone else manages the space for me. That's not
Yep.
my job.
Right.
But I want to create a database. I create a database, and from any one of
Yep.
those, from SQL Server Management Studio, I can query
Hmm.
any one of those databases, right? So
Yep.
uh, I don't think that a warehouse is their version of Management Studio. Like, I don't understand what the warehouse is versus the database.
So the warehouse is just the compute. I don't really like the term warehouse because I think it too often gets confused that it must also contain the data, but it doesn't. It's
Okay,
just the compute that you can then operate on whatever you want.
but that's the engine. That's the database.
It's like the CPUs and the memory.
Yeah, right. Okay. So
Yeah.
we're basically I see
Yeah.
what you're saying. Oh, okay. So I think I see what you're
Yeah.
saying now. All right. So I was
Yeah.
thinking about the workings of SQL, but that's not really even important. This
Yeah.
is just like a server architecture, and we're basically saying that I have disconnected hardware, right? But my CPU is separated. It doesn't matter that it's not on the same machine. I have CPU and I have storage, and those are two.
Hmm.
They're two separate concepts, right? And they're
Yes.
not managed together. Yeah. So I think that's. I don't know. I think you can do that with. I mean, again, this isn't to compare it completely to Azure, but I think you can do that with Azure. I mean, you just keep making it bigger. I guess they handle
Yeah.
that for you. I thought,
Okay, but now the thing, and here's what I don't know. I have no idea. But like, let's say I wanted to add another server. I don't have to do anything other than just create it. So let's go to the interface here.
Yeah.
So in the interface, I have these databases on the left. And this particular interface will only show me the current warehouse that these queries are going to run in. But if I go to warehouses, I can just keep creating them as much as I want. And I don't have to ask anyone to go provision it. And it's to create it is as simple as me saying, let's create a TDTS warehouse, and let's say that it is going to be a small. And I don't want to worry about clustering right now, so I just want there's only going to be one of these. And then the scaling policy is standard. We'll set it so that it auto suspends after 5 minutes. And if I don't want to have to use the GUI for this every time, I can click Show SQL and then go save this off somewhere so
Mhm.
that I know how to do this in code. Click Finish, and I've created another warehouse,
But
which is
yeah,
which is compute. It's
yeah, right.
CPU and memory.
It's a strange name. They must have a reason that they're calling them warehouses. There's probably more, but so you're basically just added processing power, is what you're saying,
Yes.
right?
Yep. And now this one is started, so I'm technically consuming credits. Um, if I let's say you can start them all suspended, and so you could even have like code that creates a warehouse and just leaves it suspended. You don't pay for it until it started. So technically, it is running right now. I'm going to
Right,
go ahead and suspend it. I'm not worried about running out of credits tonight or anything.
right. So
On
this
the
is interesting.
database
If you're going
side,
to run like a big job or something like
mhm,
that, maybe you fire up a whole bunch of warehouse. Let's say for your nightly job, you fire it up. It's going to go against the same data storage, right? But you've got like
yeah,
CPU that's just dedicated to maybe your nightly job that runs. You fire it up, and it has no effect on the performance, I would guess, of the date
other
the
warehouses.
other warehouses that are like busy doing
Yeah,
their regular jobs and stuff like
right.
that.
So there
So
you go. You've recognized one thing. And again, I'm sure you can do this with other systems in various ways, but this is pretty much these are independent. So there's zero contention, right? Now,
what
any
can
warehouse
yeah,
can run queries against any of these databases.
right.
Um,
This is what the real Japan was asking. He says, yeah, I think it's a he. Sorry, he or she says. So if you have two different warehouse, they are going against the same storage. I guess they could obviously go against different storage if you wanted to, right?
sure,
But
sure.
they
Well,
can go against.
warehouses actually don't go against storage. In a query, I could use, let's say both you and I had access to this new TDTS warehouse. I could write a query that goes against Snowflake sample data, and you could write another query that goes against TestDB. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Okay, so um, the key is that you can keep scaling, and I feel like there's two kind of pivot points on where people scale, maybe more than two. I think we can talk about that in a little bit. I don't want to get too hung up on it. The same thing with databases. You can just keep creating these, and if you don't store any data in them, they don't cost you anything. Once you start storing data, that's where you're going to pay for data. You pay for data, you pay for compute. It would be kind of like running a warehouse. I want to be careful in saying that a warehouse is like a single instance, because again, your typical on-premise SQL server is some compute with some storage attached, and if you wanted to add to either, you have to provision that somehow. You either got to add more disks or add more compute. And here, what you're doing is you're adding it to your account, and then you go to work on it.
Yeah. Now, Mike Shea put something big in now. It's got quotes around it, so I'm guessing that Mike copied this from somewhere, unless he rolled this off his tongue.
Yeah.
Snowflake processes queries using MPP. That's a good one. Massively parallel processing compute clusters where each node in the cluster stores a portion of the entire data set locally. This approach offers the data management simplicity of a shared disk architecture, but with the performance of scaled out benefits of a shared nothing architecture. Shared nothing. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess one of my, you know, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot to this, right? I don't work with, we're trying to move everything off a SQL Server. So it's really interesting. Comparing this to SQL Server, this sounds like a really big benefit, right? Comparing that, I would be curious to know how this compares to other cloud-based data offerings and things like that, right? That's where I'm really curious because they seem to have their own special sauce, so to speak, right?
Right.
This is definitely like the stuff you're talking about, and when I think about SQL Server, I'm like, yeah, this is an advantage over that. And again, I'm not disparaging SQL Server. That's a on-premises architecture, and that can't compare with a cloud architecture. You know what I mean, right? It would be the same thing if I was comparing it to an Oracle database. You can't do that on Oracle either, right? This is a whole different animal, right?
Yeah. So let's take a look at some of their sample data here. They have this customer table that's 101 gigs, and it's got 1.5 billion rows. So, I did a little bit of a data preview here just so we can kind of see this.
Okay.
And I may get this wrong. Let's create a new worksheet. And it took my data preview away. Thanks a lot. So let's do that again, just so I can because that way we can pick a few things here. So I can come over. Oh, in fact, they've already done it for me. But I can use commands that are familiar to you, like use database, right? And I could say, which database is this again? It's the Snowflake sample data. So Snowflake, and I think there were, there were. Okay, so I could do things like this, and I can say like use schema because there's a schema here, TPCH SF 10,000, which is their big sample. And now that I've done that, I can also do something else. I can say use warehouse. So I don't want to use the small warehouse. Let's use this really small one, this compute warehouse. And it's not suspended right now. Actually, I'll stick with TDTS since it is suspended. So I want to use warehouse TDTS. And then we could write a query. We could say like select star from customer, where, and let's do something easy. Let's say the cust key. I just want to pick one of these. So it equals 5156 40964. Simple, right?
Just off the top of your head, yeah.
Yeah, not trying to do anything crazy here. One of the things that you can do is you can say like all queries and then run them all. I also kind of got used to hitting that shortcut key that they're showing there, shift control return. But it's going to do it. It's going to do its thing. We get a history here, where you can see like every query that you've run. And I did this on a small warehouse, and it's done here. It returned my one row. It said it had to scan 3.4 gigabytes to do that. So I'll be interested in taking a look at the profile in a little bit, because remember, this was a 101.6 gigabyte table.
Hmm.
It took 13 seconds. Whether that's fast or not, I will leave to your judgment, because, do we have a comparable 1.5 billion row database to compare this to? I don't have it on me
Let me
right
see.
now.
Let me check my pockets here because
Yeah.
I thought I. Yeah, I guess not.
So I'm not here to try and tell you like that's faster than the rest of the world. I simply can't answer that for you if you're watching. But not too bad, right? If we ran it again, we'll try that in a little bit. So I'm going to click on the query, and what I get here is some details about it, and I get something that's going to look a little bit like the query profiler,
Hmm.
maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
And it says, hey, I did a table scan, and then I gave you the answer, which is kind of what we would expect.
Yeah. You search
So
by ID, right? So,
yeah. But something interesting that Snowflake did to try and speed this up, and this is being discussed somewhere else in this document here, right here. Oh, I don't have it drawing. So right here in the lower right, it says pruning.
Hmm.
So before you ask, there's no index on this table. Let's say you were in SQL Server and you were going to query by cust key a lot. You might use an index so that way you get to your answers very quickly.
Certainly. That's actually what you said. It was quick, and you said we could expect that. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, because it probably is on the index. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
that's
So
exactly
there's
what I
no
thought.
index.
Huh.
So how did it do that? Well, the way it did it, what this data is telling me is that it was able to exclude approximately a third of the database by saying, I didn't really have to look at many of my partitions. Partitions are its single unit of storage. In SQL Server terms, you might think of pages, but I don't want you to concentrate too much on them being pages. It was able to say, I actually only had to look at about a third of these to figure this out. And you're like, wait, how did you know? Because you didn't have an index. Like how
Yeah.
would you, as you're going over your unit of measure, your unit of storage, why were you able to do that? So some of the secret sauce here is that in each of these partitions, they store a little bit of metadata.
Yeah.
And what they do is they say, this is the maximum value in this partition, and this is the minimum value in this partition. So that way, when the query's coming over it, it looks at cust key and says, what's your maximum and minimum again? Oh, it's out of bounds of what I'm looking for. I don't even need to consider you.
Right.
I can move on.
Well, that's a form of indexing in a way, right? Like it's creating, I wouldn't call them lookup tables or whatever, but it's basically building metadata about its data.
Right. It's just that you're not in control of it by default.
Right. Exactly.
So
But maybe we don't
an
need to
index
be like,
you're in control of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I guess it must do that for every column, right? Since you didn't provide a key.
Right.
If you have a
By
customer
default.
key and then the next column is first name, somehow it has to figure out how to do that. But that would be
Yeah.
interesting.
Right. So basically what they do is as you're loading data in, partitions are created. Basically they say, well, we need another partition, so let's create one, and it starts creating it, and then when it's full, it makes the next one. So I've told you by default. I kept saying by default. You, Andy, do not control that. But still, what I think they're proud of is that, hey, we've got a speed up technology here that you didn't even have to configure. So like they keep talking about near zero management. If in your case you said, you know what, we've got a couple queries that we've got to run against this massive database. They're super important to us, and we need something that's like indexing. There are some techniques that you can use. That what they do is they will cost you a little bit more because they apply some background compute and some background storage to essentially either add more metadata or to create the partitions in an indexed fashion. Like, let's keep the data close together that you're saying is the keys. So now that's starting to sound like indexes, right? But like to this particular example, their sample database, they've done none of this. one of
Right.
the other things that I've been told is they actually didn't optimize the loading of this data. If this data were to have been loaded sequentially by cust key, well, then it would have then the partitions would have been perfectly organized and
Ah.
right. If it would
Well,
have been loaded
yeah.
sequentially, then it would have been loaded perfectly. But they said they didn't do that, is what I've heard.
Well,
Um,
that changes everything, right? Because I was assuming that it was right. I was assuming that these
yeah,
were loaded. And when you said, well, there's a max value and a sort of a maximum and a minimum for something, well, then it's just in order, and they know what's on this page. It's like paging of some sort. But now I don't know how the heck it works. I mean, honestly, and I don't need to. That's they need to know how that works, I guess. But it's starting to sound more impressive the way it would work. You know. That's kind of interesting that they're not sequentially loaded.
at least in this particular, well, so what they're saying is this data was grabbed somewhere. They didn't go through any process to make any key perform particularly well. They just loaded it.
Right.
So could some of these keys be better ordered? Sure, but that's not the point. The point is,
Right.
is they just want you to take away that what we do is instead of SQL Server having to do this full table scan because it doesn't know any better, there's some built-in techniques to sort of short circuit that without you doing anything. That's the near zero management. That's supposed to
Yeah.
make you say like, oh wow, I didn't even think about optimizing yet, and maybe I'm happy.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting there to me, right? Um, you talk about like value add and things like that, right? So, um, with most of the things I'm familiar with from a data management perspective, we can add those indexes, right? But developers aren't particularly good at doing that, right? So whether or not you can doesn't mean you do on a regular basis and maintain those things. And so there's a value add that the database just does that stuff for you.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting to me. Now, I have to say though, I'm wondering, and maybe you're going to go there later, or maybe you don't know the answer, but typically if you're doing all this like we could call it auto indexing, even though that's really not what it is. But usually you pay a price on a write for those kind of things, for this
Hmm.
thing to figure out how it's going to organize this data.
Hmm.
Do you know anything about that? I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So I want to take real quick, and Mike said something here. Mike Shea
Yeah.
said you said this was a 100 GB database and it only scanned 3 GB without any indexing. So here's where I'm going to beg a little forgiveness that we talked about how it considered a third of the database, but yet it still says it only scanned 3 gigs. Does that mean that in order to make it into this partition scanned, does that mean that it considered all of the data? I don't know. I don't know. To me, this is showing that I didn't consider the whole database, so there's a win. And then, secondly, I only ended up scanning 3 GB. Can I tell you I know for sure what that means? I can't really, just because I don't feel like there's enough context here.
Right.
But I do think Mike's point is worth repeating.
Oh yeah.
So, and then he also asked a second ago, are partitions basically shards? I'm here's where I'm going to beg off a little bit, not being a huge data platform person, but I'm going to say no, and here's why. And this will answer the question you just had a second ago on this wonderful diagram. Let's see if I can do a little bit better. You
That's
just said
pretty.
something about you just said something about fast loads. So let's play with that a little bit. If you're only appending, that's going to be fast in Snowflake. And the reason why is if all you're doing is inserting new rows, then it says, "Oh, I need a new partition." So it draws that. I went off the page there a little bit and it starts filling it up with data, right? And then at some point it says, "I'm done. I can't add any more to this partition because I don't know, whatever their partition limits are, I don't know." So let's create another one. So if all you're doing is appending, then this is fast, right? And I'm going to tell you right now, if you have a database with a lot of churn, you're not going to get the benefit of this append first methodology. I don't think that means that you should dismiss Snowflake and just say, like, forget it, not for me. Just these are all considerations we make as developers, right? I think one thing I think we do as developers a lot, you can tell me what you think, Andy, is I think sometimes we optimize prematurely in our head. Like we say, well, that doesn't sound like it fits my scenario, so this probably isn't the technology I want. I don't know that. It might be super fast and faster than what you have now, even though it doesn't sound like it's perfectly optimized for your scenario.
Yeah, it's hard to know those things, right?
Yeah.
That's why as developers, first of all, it pays for us to play around with these things and start to figure out where things work because maybe it it would be great for your scenario, whatever your scenario is, right? I mean, I was already thinking, I was already making these decisions in my head because I remember you're saying, well, this is really it's designed for, or maybe it was in Mike's quote there, that this is really for big data.
Yeah.
And so then, everybody always thinks they have big data until you find out what big data really is. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I don't have that kind of data. Like big data is not what big data used to be, right? Like you need a lot of data, I think, to be big data.
Oh man.
We're not talking about like, a couple hundred gigabytes of data, is not really like big data.
Yeah.
And so
So
I would wonder though how that plays in when you think about the decision process that developers are thinking about is like, at what point, like, does it pay? Oh, I've got a simple database that's got a bunch of lookup tables in it and stuff like that for my CRUD application, and I've got a couple thousand customers, whatever, like simple stuff. Does it help there? Or is it like no more expensive where you're like, hey, if it doesn't help, it doesn't help. But I have it because it's a great tool to use.
right. So Mike is saying, like, does it do what I described, like that one at a time thing? I want to make it clear that I should have made it clear that I was describing logically. It probably does. They probably do not do that. Um,
I mean, they
I
don't
wouldn't be
write with a
surprised.
pen on the screen and like draw rows. You don't think they do that?
Well, if you're loading data with a large warehouse that has eight servers, and maybe each server can have so many threads, to your point, Mike Shea, they very well may say, well, we could write to 32 new partitions at a time, and we're certainly going to be writing that much data, so let's create them and do that in parallel. I believe that that's all probably true. I can't tell you that that's the true. So logically though, um, the reason why that's important will become apparent later. What I'd like to do is I would like to make a modification here. Let's go back to our worksheet. Um, and look, it's already 9:18. We're gonna scratch the surface on this thing
Oh
tonight.
yeah,
So
yeah. You're
so
introducing
let
such a whole new thing that I mean, it's
yeah.
yeah.
What I want to do is I want to change this customer name. So let's do that. And let's see. Do you think I can get the SQL here? What is it? Update customer and then say set. Boy, wouldn't this be awesome if I did this from memory? Set CNAME equal to Andy's customer.
No quote. Yeah,
And
you need quote or something like that on
let's
that
put some
one. Yeah.
quotes around that.
I already don't
Where
like it because they used C_name, and I don't like that. I hate that naming convention. Sorry. I've ordered my
515-640-964.
developers that we don't use those old naming conventions anymore. I don't know
Before
how
I
you
do that,
guys.
let's run this query again. Before I do that, and there's a reason why I want to run this query real quick. Let's run that query real quick, and it's done. Took 150 milliseconds this time. You can probably guess why. When you run the same query, I believe it's by default 24 hours, and maybe it's 24 hours period. They recognize that it's the exact same query. The data hasn't changed, so they go query reuse, and
Sure.
they just give you the answer. That's I'm not saying plenty of systems do that, right?
Yep.
But kind of cool. So if you have need for a database where you basically say, hey, I know that queries get reused and that many different clients are going to ask the same thing for a period of time, like a day, an hour, whatever, that might be of benefit.
Oh yeah. Sure.
But if I would have changed the data, that wouldn't have happened. So I'm going to go
Okay.
ahead and change the data now. And insufficient privilege because
Operating
I
on table
need
customer.
to let's change um let's do this. Snowflake sample data. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I may have just goofed there actually. Let's try running the whole thing. Okay. Oh, really? I can't operate on. Oh, wait, that's why I can't touch that. Okay, so I can't touch that data. So let's do this instead.
That because that's
Let's,
Snowflake's data. It's not your data, right?
yeah.
Yeah. They're sample
And I'm
universe.
actually not sure if I'm allowed to clone it. So let's try, let's try cloning that data. Um, so we're gonna go into something that I kind of wanted to wait on to a little bit. So we talked a little bit earlier about how data is separated from compute, but I haven't really explained some of the benefits and how they store their data, including that partition stuff. So if I say I already have a test DB, so using test DB and I don't want to say use test DB. I wonder if it's easier for me to just do this from here. Use test DB. I know I'm cheating a little bit, but I don't want to waste too much time. And data, and I think it's okay for me to be sysadmin here. Let's see if I can say create table, big table, and then say clone. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. There might be some limitation where they don't let me walk away. I'm not going to take the big table if that's okay. And
Yeah.
then what was it? Customer? It's customer. Let's see what.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see what happens if I try to run this. Cannot clone from a table that was imported from a share. Yeah, not surprised. So we're gonna need. So we don't have data here. Because what I was hoping to do is I was hoping to modify it and then show how a feature called time travel works. But unfortunately,
Oh,
I
time
don't
travel.
I
Yeah,
don't
that's a
have
cool
it.
feature. I can imagine. I mean, I've
So they have a feature called
yeah.
time travel where you can run a query and then say as of the database at a certain
Oh,
timestamp
oh, that's amazing. Seriously, that's
or or as of a certain query ID.
wow.
So
Wow.
I
So you
wanted
could
to show that
see,
off.
oh, yeah, that's a cool feature. Holy moly. I mean, just you even just saying that, right? Like, I would hope that people that are listening right now could just be like, that concept is like, wait, think about what you could do to troubleshoot things or go back in time and figure things out. And Real Japan says you have to be going 88 miles an hour to use it, which is, of course, a reference to Back to the Future. Uh, and that is, yeah, and you got to drive a DeLorean to do that too. But that is, even if you can't demonstrate it yet, that is an amazing feature, right?
Yeah. And what I was going to do is that was going to tie back into the partitioning. So let me see if I can get some data loaded. I'm not sure, but
Well, you could just add a row at a time. We could still time travel back through a couple of rows
we
a day.
can. We can. So I was going to say, is that what we're going to do here?
Gonna
Is
be a
we're going
little
to
lame,
create
but it's all right.
we're going to create a table.
Yeah,
I'm seeing if I can get a table definition that's already kind of ready to go instead of us trying to.
I understand. Yeah, I mean it makes sense.
Let's see.
Man, you should have opened up with time travel. I mean that is, whoo, I'm excited about this.
Okay, so let's say that we create a table. What are we in? We're in TDTS test DB. That's good. So let's say create a table, tonight's table, because that sounds good. And we're gonna say, oh, we have to put we
I
open
got
and
an idea. Why
close.
don't you think, because you're thinking and typing,
Yeah,
and I'll
go
do a
ahead.
little commercial while you're. So listen, while Chris is writing all this stuff out, again, we're not done. We're not wrapping up here yet, but thanks for being with us tonight. We love the comments and we love having people hang out with us. And if you're looking at us on Twitch, we hope you'll follow us or subscribe to us on YouTube if that's where you are. You can hit the thumbs up and like the video. And we're also curious to know what you guys think about this type of content. To be honest, we usually stay somewhere in the Microsoft family, and we're sort of delving a little bit out of there tonight. And we're doing something that's a little different for the show, but that's what I think we like about the show, Chris and myself and Rich as well, is that you got a typo there in the word description there, Chris. But
Oh, really?
we like doing different things, and we like learning things. Like this is a totally new show for me. I'm like, wow, I'm learning new stuff from Chris, right? So we love to know what you guys think about this kind of content, and the fact that we're somewhat inconsistent. I think in our programming. I don't mean our programming like the language. I mean like our as a television show or something. You have programming. And Mike's asking, be curious to see a side-by-side Snowflake versus Cockroach DB. Yeah, that's interesting. And Mike says he's a database person, so he eats this stuff up, more DB content. Yeah, DB content is really cool. And I think there's a lot of stuff we could do there. I'd like to do some stuff on Cosmo DB and stuff like that as well. And then the Real Japan says, hey, learning new stuff is fun, unless it's PHP. Yeah, I'm with you. I would say, listen, what would happen if I said next week on the Dev Talk Show, SharePoint? I think maybe we would start to not, maybe we wouldn't love that. But at least I don't know if I would. But so, yeah, sounds like you guys like saying different things. And that's really cool. That's what we like to do here. So, Real Japan's ears are bleeding. All right, so Chris, how'd you do? You getting somewhere?
Yeah, I think so. Let's preview this data. And I kind of goofed, but we've got some data here. Look at that.
Yeah,
Let's fix the one thing. Let's update. Man, I haven't written this much SQL.
Yeah, you're doing pretty well. I don't write a lot of SQL these days. I'm thinking, does Entity Framework connect to this? No. But all right.
So I think there is a third-party piece of software that you can buy for that. But in other words, I think somebody is out there who made a provider.
Sure.
I'm not gonna. Please do not hold me to that, everybody. But I'm pretty sure that is true. So let's just keep that. We might come back to that stuff later. So let's select star and take a look at what we've got.
Yeah, Ross the Lip says yes to that, by the way. Commercial third-party library, yeah. So that's interesting.
I would go with him on that one.
Yeah.
Trust him on that one. So here we are. We've got a simple table, okay? Now, I just selected it and we saw something happen. So let's make an update. I could actually already do this now, but whatever. Let's make an update. Let's say let's
change Mike to the Real Japan or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So let's update tonight's table. Set name equals the Real Japan, where ID equals 2. Okay, so we've changed something, right? And I'm gonna run it. I goofed, of course. No. Set name equals set name. Oh, I know. The double quotes.
Oh, it's single quotes. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so that worked.
Yeah.
And then let's go ahead and. Did I get rid of my select? That was dumb. Why would I do that? We need that.
Yeah, that's just bad. That's a rookie move.
It was. It totally was. Okay, so
by the way, updated. Can you turn it off so that it doesn't every time show you the query that you're going to run? That just seems like one of those weird prompts. I'm assuming you could disable that feature somewhere, right?
I don't know.
I just wonder, some things I just think that's great for certain things, but yeah, keep going.
We'll look at that in a second. Maybe I can turn it off. Okay, so the table has changed a little while ago, and we can go look at this history and look at all this stuff I did, right? I don't quite have enough of a view here. So what I would like to do is I would like to look at the history this way. And
I didn't see how you got there. You clicked something quickly, but okay.
Yep. So there's a history tab at the top.
Okay.
This is I just get a wider view, in my opinion. And we can see everything that I've done, even creating the table, then dropping it because of the misspelling, creating it again, inserting some stuff into it. And then, I wanted Mike to be a different ID. So let's fix that. And then we selected, and then I failed to update the Real Japan, but then I did update the Real Japan. And so when we selected, we saw that. What if I want the data as it was after this update here, which happened at 9:27:59 p.m. So I want to select star from tonight's table, but I want to do it like 9:28. So let's try doing that.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about, right?
I'd like to see this work. In all honesty, this is cool.
Yeah, and then besides that, I've got to bring up my notes because of course I don't remember at all how to do it on the fly. It's easy when you're practicing, and then you actually say, okay, so you say select star from tonight's table at, and I can say, let's see if I can get this right. Uh, Good luck to me. Okay, at timestamp. And then let's see, I don't know if I have to put in the whole time, but we said it was 9:28 p.m. So I'm going to start 9:28 p.m. is going to be 21:28.
Okay.
And I hope that I only have to do this much.
Are you saying
See this,
I'm
don't ask me again. Let's click that. Okay.
yeah.
Data is not available. Okay. That's possible because
Requested time is either beyond or allowed. Prime travel. So maybe it's too soon. Like, maybe they don't let you go back like 2 minutes ago. You have to go back to like 2 hours ago or something like that.
it's more likely that like this is UTC or something.
Oh.
Because you can put a timestamp in here. I'm thinking, let's also put in the rest of the date. Let's do that.
Mike
20.
Shea says UTC is what you need. At least I don't know if that's a
I'm
guess or whatever, but
I'm thinking that he might be right. And so let's see. Future dates. Yeah. So see, it thinks it's the future, right? Boy, what did I
yeah.
do there? So UTC plus
Well, go
5,
back. Yeah.
16.
Sure.
We may end up having to do this by query
Well,
ID.
wait. You got the
Which,
date wrong. Today's the 10th.
oh, see, well, it's not, of course. Thank you.
I just happened to notice you got lucky. Ah. Now go to UTC, right? That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. So
Close.
why don't we do
You
this?
just put in EST. Yeah, that would
You
be
can
helpful.
use timestamps,
Yeah, exactly. Like I think
but
there's some
but
things that we don't even have to show. Like I think we can make the assumption that it works, right? Like I believe you.
oh no,
Uh,
you're gonna see it. You're
okay.
gonna see it. What I need is this query ID because the other way that you can
You
time
said this.
travel
Yeah, yeah.
is I wanted it before. Do I have that right? I want it before I updated it. So let's say before this ID.
Okay.
So let's do it this way. I'm gonna want to say before.
Ross Lips got it on the chat for you if you want.
Okay.
-5. Oh, I see what it is.
Oh, the timestamp had
Yeah,
to
let's
be
try
correct.
that. Yeah, let's try that. Thanks, Ross.
Let's do it. We'll try before this one. I think there might be a quicker way to get that, but come on. Come on. Please come back with me. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we said select from tonight's table before we ran that query, and it shows Mike.
Yeah.
It doesn't show the real Japan. Now, I want to go ahead and take our contribution here.
Yeah, please. I like that. This is great. I would think now, while you're doing that, we could talk. I mean, now we can see that they're storing an awful lot of data if they're keeping track of all these things as well, like before and after and stuff like that. So, the fact that that performs pretty well, like I don't know, this seems like I would think there's an awful lot of data needed to have all this like copies of the query because you can probably join to other tables and the joins have to work at the time, and I don't know, that just seems.
So we can talk about how it works.
You know how it works. Okay, well let's try this. Yeah.
Let's see if we can get this right. So this is select star from tonight's table at, and what was it? It was timestamp goes to, I think I'll probably always say goes to for that.
Yeah, I do sometimes too.
Just because,
You got some. Okay. And he possibly said you might need to add seconds.
Okay.
No, though.
Where are we at? We're at 9:28, 0 seconds minus 5. And see how it's still saying like beyond before the object
Yeah,
creation time, which is like I don't think that's right. I just don't have this timestamp correct.
I think you're right. Yeah, yeah. Because listen, we saw it work, right? So the
Yeah,
timestamp, the time travel data is there. Otherwise, the other
right.
one wouldn't have worked. So
Right.
it's I don't think
So
we need to harp on that too long.
so let's talk about how that works, okay? And this is you might laugh a little bit because you might say like, of course it must. So we talked a little bit about how when you do a data load, let's say we load a bunch of data and it creates, why is it doing that? Create a bunch of data and it makes a bunch of partitions, right? Okay? So, you know how I like to talk a lot about Git on this show and in general?
Yes, I've heard you do
I'm
that.
going to use a Git metaphor for this.
All right.
So, if the table is made up of these micropartitions, okay? What if micropartitions were immutable? They never changed. And so what we could do if micropartitions never changed is a little bit later. So we could say the table at such and such point in time after a certain query, which we'll just call it X because that's easier than coming up. So after query X, the table is made up of pointers to these micropartitions, micropartition 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then somebody does an insert. And that insert creates let's just say it creates a new micropartition 5. So now I'm going to have this query ID Y, and it's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But X is made up of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when you go and do a time travel query to say, hey, select star as of X, it goes, yeah, I know that. I have the pointers to the immutable micropartitions. So
Yep.
let's say we change a row that's in 3.
Yeah.
There's a row in 3 that we're going to update. We do an update statement with Z, and it creates a new micropartition that's a copy of everything in here except for that one row, and I'm going to call that 3A.
Yeah.
And it says, well, I'm made up of 1, 2, 3A, 4, and 5. And in a very nutshell way, probably oversimplified, that this is how Snowflake stores what a table means.
Probably oversimplified.
Way
Yeah,
oversimplified for sure.
but that makes sense. And then I guess they would also, you based it on the query, the X query, the Y query, and the Z query, but time would come into that as well because you could say, well, 3A was created at 9:05 or whatever it is like
Yeah,
that. So I could see how that could work. And you know what?
there's a
When you put it
timestamp
like
for each of
that,
these, right?
it's one of these interesting things that when you put it in that way, and you think, that's really not that complicated. Like it makes sense, is what I mean by that.
Right.
Like someone thought of this, and all the power to them that they thought of this, right? The people that I wish I came up with these ideas, and I don't. But but it's
Now it's a
it's
mess.
like, what's that?
Now it's a mess when I added query A that
Oh yeah,
modified micropartition 1A. So it's made up
right,
of 1A, 2, 3A, 4, and 5. And
yeah,
then because you have timestamps for each of these queries, when somebody makes a timestamp based query, you just figure out where it is.
right,
You go, oh,
exactly,
it's right here. So I really want Z or something like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. This really, what I was trying to say is, it's an example of something that's I don't want to like trivialize it. Like this is like really
No, no,
complex. This is really cool, but yet it's not like it's. I'm sure there's more to it. Like you said, you oversimplify. You simplified this, but the concept makes sense. Like the fact that we can
right,
understand how this could work. That's like it's really cool.
right.
Now making that
So
work efficiently and like still fast is another story.
yeah,
Right? But
yep.
um,
So you can imagine that what that means is since we have this time travel feature, which the documentation calls data retention and time travel, you're going to see them used interchangeably. I think the official feature name is data retention because when you use SQL to set it, you say set data retention period. You can set it up to 90 days. The default, and you also have to use the enterprise edition for this, for basically, otherwise you only get a day. But this is a way that your organization could say, like, one use for this, in my opinion. Let me just give you a sample thought: is what if this is a database? It's just got a ton of data. I mean, it's terabytes and terabytes, and you do this run at the end of every week on a Friday, but you've got a team that isn't done with their analytics yet. Are you going to say to them, hold on, let's make a copy of this 400 terabyte database? How long is that going to take so that we can go do our run for next week? That might take a week.
No.
It might be impossible to do. So instead, you tell that team, don't sweat it. Just do the queries as of Friday at midnight, and we're going to go ahead and load the next week's data. And the team is they don't care. They're like, that's fine. I can query as of the data at that point in time. Perfect.
Yeah, that's a great example. And there's, you could take that to other ways of looking at that too. Somebody forgot to run the job. Like, oh no, what are we gonna do? Well, run it on Monday. Pretend it was Friday. Yeah. Like that.
Yeah.
There's. I mean, I think we could probably go on and on about use cases, right? But this is,
right.
This is a very strong feature. And I
so
don't
remember
know.
this select. So if I do a select star from Knight's table by itself to Knight's table without doing anything else, we see the current data. And if I say do it from before that statement, we see the past data. Now, there's one more thing I can do. I was trying to do this earlier. I was saying, let's create another table. Let's say create table, and let's call it past table. And I say clone tonight's table. First of all, let's just do this. If I do nothing more than this, I think that works. I don't think, okay. So we've got a new table in here. I've got to refresh to see it. I've got a new table called past table, and it's a copy.
Okay.
Now, that's not too, I mean, by itself, you're going to say, like, so what? I mean, I've got select into, like, what's the big deal, right? And I'm not blaming you for saying that. That's a copy of tonight's, it's a brand new table, and it could go diverge. But what I want to talk about is, what did Snowflake do under the covers? So here's where I will challenge you, Andy, to think like our past Git talks. When I say a branch is created, just a pointer is created. No copying takes place. That's the same thing that happens here. So it basically says, well, I know where A is, so let me just copy that pointer. It costs you no extra data until you start to diverge. Once those tables start to diverge, you are going to pay for that divergent data, right?
For the divergent data, but you're not paying for both copies of the data. So if you have 1,000,000 records in there, there's still and there's 2 copies of it or a clone, there's still only 1,000,000 records. Now, if I start adding more records to one of those tables, well, of course I'm paying for those extra records, right? But I'm not paying for like double. And it's funny because your analogy to Git is a really good one here. And because of that analogy, because you set it up that way, when you started talking about clone, and I was thinking to myself, man, I'll bet it just uses that timestamp. Like it just seemed like so,
you know. To think about how it works, yeah. So if I as long as I have this SQL right, then I've now created a past table 2. But look what I told it to do. Can you go create it from a previous state?
Oh, yeah.
And so you're beginning to see now, like, because of this, and again, I wanted to, it's got Mike, the original value. I want to make it clear to everybody that this is an oversimplification of what I'm sure it does. But I think the mental model is right. Not just in us thinking about it, but in how you're billed for it too. So even though I've got 4 states of the table shown here, that happen to create these 7 micropartitions, I'm billed for 7 micropartitions, not 4 times 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
2 didn't have to be changed. 4 didn't have to be changed. I think that's a good logical model. And yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know much about what other databases do here. I really just don't know. I'm just saying that I like this use case. So
this is a powerful feature. Yeah, there's no question about it. And Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, wow. I honestly, I'm a little taken back by that. This is cool.
Yeah. And look, I'm going to tell you right now, I've barely scratched the surface tonight of how this thing works. For example, you can do things like, Andy, let's say you're a customer of mine, or let's say you also have a Snowflake database and I have a Snowflake database and you created it. One thing we didn't do tonight is talk about how you create these things. I actually have, let me see if I can show this without, I'll have to think about how to do this here, but I'll keep talking. There it is. Yeah, this is what I wanted. So I won't keep talking. If you went to and created your own free trial, you get asked which cloud you want to put it in. So they support AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure. You also get to pick what region for your trial. Okay.
Okay.
This is the cloud in which Snowflake lives in. And let's say you and I, Andy, were both customers. I had a Snowflake database, you had a Snowflake, an account with many databases, all kinds of compute. I have the same thing. And we both have picked the same cloud and region. What's really cool about that is if you shared a database with me and all I did was do select queries off of it, the data, it's one copy of the data. Nobody pays for a second copy. It just happens. I could clone your data and as long as I don't change it, it doesn't diverge, doesn't get paid for. As long as you're in the same cloud in the same region. So there's some real magic if you can coordinate that, which I'm not trying to say is easy. Your own scenarios may vary. Um, but that's really interesting too. That like here I am, I could be in a totally different account and say, oh gosh, you're a Snowflake customer too. Let's share this stuff. Now they have mechanisms for sharing across clouds and regions, but it's just not as magical, right? So
Yeah.
as this whole thing of like, yeah, I already know what pointers to give you, so here you go.
That's cool. And so it's interesting. It's available on the three
Yeah.
different cloud providers. So if I was in Azure, I could go to, would this be something I would just go to the Azure portal and set it up on
So
that
that's
side?
good.
Or do you know this
That's
stuff
a good
yet? Yeah.
question. I think that you can go through the marketplace to get started, but here's the thing. This will not live in a subscription of yours. You will not use it in the portal. And when you kind of think about this, think about it a little bit, it kind of makes sense. It's not in our Azure subscriptions, it's in their Azure subscriptions
Right.
because
So they're
it's this
basically making like a
multi-tenant.
service connection between my Azure
Yeah.
subscription and their Snowflake cloud or
It's
wherever
not
that is.
required though. It's not required. You could go to them and sign up. You can say you want to sit on top of whatever cloud you want. You can hand them over your payment information and you just let them do it. Now, I want to make it very clear that I do not understand the financial side of this, but I believe that it's also possible, Andy. Let's say that you had you already I'm sure there are deals for consuming Azure where if you kind of say I'm going to spend a bunch of it, then you get, I don't know, maybe you get some kind of deal or something. I do know that you can work with these different providers to say, okay, can you consume some of my personal Azure commit while I'm using you? And they'll be like, yeah, we can do that. So you have lots of options. But I want to make it very clear that you should go find out what those options are and not listen to anything I just said because it is not Snowflake payment advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You don't want to. I mean, I think we all know that we're just talking
Yeah,
here. We're just a bunch of friends hanging out
yeah, yeah.
after the user group, right? Here we are, just hanging out, talking in the parking lot about what's cool and what Chris is working on these days, right? And that's that's what this is. There's no there's no NDA here but there's a guaranteed disclaimer that we're just talking, right? It's like
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, you know what? Like I wanted to make clear, if for those who may have come a little late, is that nobody asked us to do this. I didn't. We didn't get anything from anyone other than the trial that any of you can sign up for at the Snowflake site. And I encourage you to do so to take a look at this and play with it. And we talked. One thing we didn't show tonight at all because I know just talking about this has taken up most of the show, right? We didn't talk at all about loading data, which you generally Snowflake really shines when you load from like Azure Blob or AWS S3 or something like that. Um, if you've used Azure Synapse SQL Pool, used to be called SQL Data Warehouse, very similar procedures where you can stage it in your Azure blob. Maybe it's like a comma separated file, or you
Right.
can even be very granular in how you define the row and column separators, or maybe it's JSON, or maybe it's another format, and you load in through that. It's not the kind of database that you're going to load with like insert statements. You're not going to do bulk copy. You could do it from your machine, but it's probably not what you're going to do. If you're going to use a database like this, you're probably loading in data a lot. And so you're going to have some pattern. Let's get it into Azure Blob, and then let's tell Snowflake to run a task every week to consume the latest files, something like that. Like that's probably what you're going to do.
Yeah, it's something. It's a, boy. Now I'm like, and I see Mike's talking about needing to play with this, and I'm thinking, yeah, add another thing to the list. I mean, there's an endless list of things out, for us to play around with out there. Real Japan asks a good question. I don't know if you know the answer. Do they have like a dev tier? I mean, are they set up with like, I guess he's saying, are you paying production, or do they have like a, free tier and a dev tier? And have you gotten that far?
So my answer there is I would say no. Um, this isn't the kind of thing like, I'll pick on Azure, right? Cosmos DB has a free tier now. Um, other outside of the free trial, I don't know of anything other than ponying up. So my impression is this is the kind of thing you'll use at work. Do I think they should offer developer tiers so that they can cultivate a community of developers? Certainly, we've seen cloud vendors be very successful with that model, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think it's going to shine when you load a lot of data at once and when you query a lot of data at once. I think that is when it will shine. Do I think it will shine if you say, this is going to be my user database, and it's going to keep track of your login sessions, and my website's going to hit it to figure out what the user shopping cart is? I don't really believe that it will shine there. And I think that's what Ross the Lip is saying here, right?
Right.
Um, am I telling you shouldn't use it for that? I think I've made the point over and over that like you got to figure out if your mileage varies.
Yeah, there's always a subtle, difference. Sometimes
Yeah,
it just might not matter to you that it
yeah,
performs less for. But this is a general rule in various database designs that some of them are best for transactional writing data, some of them are best for reading data. That's why we have. It's good to have both,
right,
and
right.
so um, that's just cool. I like it.
Yeah, that's just what I think. I think that you will get the most value if you're going to store terabytes upon terabytes, and if you are going to load, heck, maybe even terabytes per week. And I'm making this stuff up, but you can see why I feel that way, because it seems to be very good at querying, at narrowing down when it has to query some super huge thing. It's also really good to share that quickly, because it might be really painful to share like, a petabyte of data, but here I'm doing it almost instantly. Um, and there's plenty of other database choices if you've got some a smaller problem to solve.
Sure. Right. Well,
So,
listen, there's lots of choices for everything. As you say, your mileage may vary. Everybody's got to do their own due diligence. We're putting stuff out there saying, hey, here's another one of those things to add to the toolbox. It's another option for you that may work out well for you. And it's pretty cool. I mean, like you said, Warren Buffett seems to like it, so that's got to be
yeah.
something. When I think of databases and performance, generally I do think of Warren Buffett. Comes to mind.
Well, it made news for that. And it just to say that, like, look, it had a massive IPO, and to hear that somebody that traditionally does not buy in to the early IPOs of a tech company, it turned some heads.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely. I'm just having
There's so
fun.
much more than what we talked about tonight. So much more I couldn't even explain to you very well. We didn't talk about like multi-cluster warehouses where when I was creating a warehouse, I told it, look, I just want one of these small things. But you could also tell it, hey, I want to have 1 to 5. And when queries start queuing up, go from 1 to 2. And when they start queuing up again, go to 3. And when they stop queuing up, go back to 2. And it'll manage all that for you. Um, but
Yeah,
hey,
that's
you know
cool.
what? Without being able to clone that huge database, we were able to write a little SQL like old times. You'll probably notice that what I wrote, some of you may have noticed that what I wrote was less like T-SQL and more like ANSI SQL, which is it's correct. That's correct. So for example, this is not legal here. A lot of us that write T-SQL would do that by rote, right? We would just always bracket these things. That's not legal. That'll blow up. So a little bit of tweaking there. The way you convert and cast might be a little different. The data types might be a little different. Like I think instead of there's no bit, but there's Boolean. So, but there are connectors for various languages. Um, for the .NET folks, there's a system.data implementation, so it feels very much like ADO.NET. You can grab it off of NuGet. They're in GitHub. There's Python. There's Go. There's Node. There's an ODBC one. There's a JDBC one, and then they have like a CLI that you could load from. So there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like, you don't need to make disclaimers on it doesn't have this, it doesn't, like, this is not Microsoft SQL Server. And so the
Yeah.
language is different. If that's what you're used to, it's different. That's not bad. That's not good. It's different, right? Maybe it's better. Maybe it's worse. But yeah, be prepared to learn new syntax, slightly new syntax is what you're saying. Yeah. So what do you think? You want to talk about what we got going on next week? Uh-oh. Are we frozen? Chris, you there? Yeah, Chris, can you hear me? I think we had I don't, yeah, can you hear me now? I'm here. Can you hear me? Or we're still streaming. Chris? There? You there? I think we might be streaming. Can you hear me? Can't hear me. What happened? Stream is good, they say. Okay, can you hear me? I don't know. I can't tell. Only Chris froze, but on all platforms. Ah, okay. And I think they're saying on the stream that they can hear us. So maybe we're back. Hopefully, there's not a long delay between me and Chris. We had a long delay earlier. Uh, yeah. So, well, things are all screwed up. But well, I think we're wrapping up anyway. And so I don't know if you guys can hear Chris. Hopefully, you can hear me. Someone tell me if they can hear me on the stream. That would be great. I don't know what happened. Yeah, Chops is here. Look at Chops coming in saying he blaming Rich for not being here tonight. And yeah, let's go with that. So we were going to wrap up the show and talk about next week. And again, I'm only talking because I don't know if we can hear Chris or not. But next week on the show, we've got our friend Sam Basu coming on to talk about. It is called Maui, which is Microsoft new UI framework, which I think is something of a replacement for WPF and that kind of stuff. I am not an expert on it. It sounds really interesting. And yeah, Real Japan says, "Ooh yeah, Sam's a great speaker." Yeah, that's what it is. Thank you. Yeah, it's a kind of the replacement of Xamarin Forms is really what it is. Thank you. That's actually more accurate. I'm trying to think on the fly, and I wasn't really ready. Yeah, Chris needs some Maui to unfreeze. That's a good one. And he's obviously hearing us on the because he's typing in the chat. So we'll be back next week, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live on Twitch and YouTube, and I think it'll be Rich will be back with us next week. He wasn't available this week, and we'll have Sam coming on, and I think that's pretty much what we want to talk about. Big thanks to Chris for putting this demo together. This conversation. He did research and really figured this out. And really took a good shot at, he's kind of winging some of the stuff. And you could see he was, up for experimenting and trying different things. And, that's what we like to do on this show. So we appreciate your being with us. And I'm just trying to think if there's something else. Chris, if you want to type in the chat, if there's something I'm forgetting about, because I think you can hear me. Chat to me personally if you want in a back channel if you think I'm forgetting something. But generally speaking, we will be with you again next week. We'll be with you next week for the Dev Talk Show, and for my good friend Chris Gomez and Rich, who's not with us tonight. And big thanks to everybody in the chat, everybody that was hanging out with us and contributing, and those of you that were just hanging back and listening. That's awesome too. Thanks so much. And we will see you guys next week on the Dev Talk Show.